Good morning. My name is Candace Prince. I'm with Green Hope Project. We are very, very happy to have Sunrise El Paso here with us, and they're going to talk about climate justice in El Paso. So I'm going to turn it over to you guys.
Hello, everyone. Welcome. My name is Angel Ulloa. I am the hub coordinator for Sunrise El Paso, and some of our comrades are also on this call. They work as organizers with us, and we're so grateful for all their work. And I'm going to go ahead and pass this introduction over to Rachel.
Hi, all. I'm Rachel Landis. I'm new to Sunrise El Paso, but I organize with Sunrise New Orleans and Sunrise Tulane, which is my campus college hub, and I'm really excited to be getting involved in my hometown as well.
Thank you, Rachel. I'm going to go ahead and screen share here. So today, Rachel and I will be presenting on the climate justice struggle here in El Paso, why it's a unique one for us, and then the current campaigns and initiatives that we have as an organization. And we're doing this in collaboration with Green Hope Project. Thank you for having us. So, Rachel?
Yes. So like Angel just said, climate justice is kind of a unique struggle here in El Paso, with having both Fort Bliss here and Juarez adjacent to us. With regards to Fort Bliss, there are a lot of issues with militarization and how the military is one of the frontrunners of the climate crisis. So obviously, there are readings that call for the abolition of border patrols and customs and police as a step towards climate liberation. You can think about just in terms of like the vehicles that they use that are running on fossil fuels and how that contributes to the climate crisis here, and just the presence of border patrol in general. And this also ties into how money is being filtered into public safety in the borderland. So as one of the poorest cities in America, this is unacceptable. It's not being funded into our public infrastructure. It's not going towards the people. The majority of our city budget is going to public safety, which was roughly $258 million in 2020, which is a huge chunk of money. That is unfathomable to me personally. But many of the safety issues that are created by the heavy militarization of our border would also be solved if it was abolished completely. And so there's also the struggle of being next to Juarez and like the challenges of binational environmental regulation. It's difficult to kind of come to a consensus between United States environmental regulations and Mexican environmental regulations, and trying to enforce those binationally across the border. And with that, we're going to talk a little bit about NAFTA, or formerly NAFTA. Now it's the United States, Mexico, Canada agreement, but functionally not much has changed. So it is roughly the same thing. So with regard to Fort Bliss and militarization, Fort Bliss is the second largest army base in the United States, and it's second only to the White Sands missile range, which is also close to us. So it is contributing to pollution and all of that in the borderland as well. And in this sort of post 9/11 era that we're in, we have been in a state of constant warfare. And the cost of that has been over $6.4 trillion. Around $2 trillion of that has been taxpayer money. And if you do the math, that works out to like $2,000 per person that pays taxes, which is a lot, especially since we didn't really consent to being in these wars. These are something that was taken on without us. But the cost of full decarbonization of the US power grid is estimated at $4.5 trillion. So there would still be a surplus of money left over if we transition to renewable energy right now. And considering the fact that renewable energy is like a long-term investment that we could continue to benefit from, and warfare is not an investment, I think that it does kind of speak for itself. But as of July 2010, power consumption of Fort Bliss dropped 3 megawatts towards a goal of achieving net zero carbon emissions. And this is a stark disconnect from the rest of the city as well, because the buildings in Fort Bliss have been retrofitted for solar. But the oligarchs of El Paso have told us that it's impossible for the city as a whole to transition, despite El Paso being one of the sunniest cities in the entire world, not just the United States. And so the monopolization of energy by El Paso Electric that has been prominent for many, many years has contributed to this. But now we are combating this given the timing of the so-called point of no return, where we need to really take urgent climate action. Otherwise, our future is going to become unlivable. So we need to all be at net zero carbon emissions by 2030. And that is basically the bare minimum that we can achieve at this point. And military investment in occupation also contributes to colonialism and imperialism abroad. There are billions of dollars given to safety, but really it's to enforce global domination and steal resources from the global south, which is made possible by America's imperialist state. And through this, this creates and exacerbates climate crises in other countries as well, which snowballs into a whole host of other issues, but specifically climate migration, which is becoming rampant and is one of the most important issues here on the border, obviously, because we have climate refugees that are trying to enter into the United States because of climate crises that we have manufactured in their home countries. So they are fleeing because they're given no other choice, and the countries that they are in cannot sustain livable environmental conditions, but to no fault of their own, it's all because of American imperialism abroad. And so this has affected El Paso, obviously, as a border town. So now our city is tied to two issues created by the imperialist state. And so moving into Juarez and how that poses a unique challenge here. Our frontera is the largest and most prominent pair of border cities in the United States. And so there's a lot of discussion around it. But that also calls for increased militarization at the border, exploitation of Mexico, and heavy NAFTA/USMCA implementations. And the most evident problem in Juarez is air pollution from heavy vehicular traffic. Our infrastructure has never been effective in decreasing traffic from those entering El Paso through Juarez and vice versa. And this is a problem that goes back for years. Public transport is not something that's very heavily invested in either Juarez or El Paso, which we saw with the streetcar, and people weren't riding the streetcar, so they had to incentivize it and make it free because El Paso is just not laid out to be a public transport friendly city. And that in turn enforces the reliance on car travel, which contributes hugely to emissions within both of the cities. And so taking a little bit of a deeper dive into this, we can look at the outsourcing of damaging environmental practices over the border because of the difference in regulations. One of the most prominent tactics, and seen throughout border cities everywhere, not just here in El Paso and Juarez, is the exploitation of quote unquote cheap Mexican labor that contributes to the prominence of maquiladoras on the border. And so maquiladoras are companies that are built in Mexico. They're factories that are built in Mexico, but they are foreign owned, and they are built there specifically to take advantage of the looser environmental regulations. But in turn, this has a negative impact on the population that these factories are built in. And so one example of this is the Solvay maquiladora in Juarez, and it is foreign owned. Solvay is a Belgian company, but they have factories everywhere. And this specific plant in Juarez is one of the world's largest producers of hydrofluoric acid, which is used to make refrigerants and herbicides and light bulbs and things like that. However, this acid is toxic, corrosive, and exposure to it can be fatal. And throughout the plant's history, there have been issues with child labor laws, which resulted in child deaths, and then toxic chemical releases that resulted in blindness from the factory workers. But attempts to shut down the Solvay plant in Juarez have failed because of economic pressure from the United States and from other powers abroad, such as Belgium, who is the owner of this company. There's also the issue of energy-intensive manufacturing processes in Juarez that are outsourced from the US that evade all EPA regulations on this side. And because these practices are carried out in foreign countries, there's no need for EPA regulations, which is how they kind of cheat the system, so to speak. Environmental regulations, as I mentioned before, are looser, and carbon taxes and stuff like that are cheaper in Mexico. So it's pretty common for foreign companies to build their plants in Mexico to take advantage of that. And this is how NAFTA comes into play now. So NAFTA well, formerly NAFTA, and now it's the United States, Mexico, Canada agreement, but the differences between the two are fairly minimal. So we're just going to be referring to it as NAFTA for familiarity. But NAFTA is an entity that is supposedly committed to fighting the climate crisis, but when you analyze it critically, you can see that it does pretty much the exact opposite because of the way that it either unintentionally or intentionally incentivizes the exploitation of foreign labor. And it also creates this dependence on a foreign energy supply that comes from the NAFTA regulations. And the Southwest regions are one of the most carbon intensive sources of energy. Sorry, let me look at my notes really quickly. But yes, back to the foreign energy sources that contradict the need to reduce greenhouse gases emissions. They ensure that a steady supply of energy to the United States are from nations that support the United States' security interests. So this is what we were talking about earlier with the heavy militarization of the border and the way that imperialism abroad manufactures climate crises in countries besides our own. That is something that NAFTA largely contributes to because of the way that it's difficult to enforce. And also the United States is one of the main contributors to NAFTA/USMCA, and so they're one of the main enforcers. And obviously, if you have a stake in these harmful practices, you're not really going to hold yourself accountable. And so you're going to overlook all of the damaging practices that your own nation is doing and use that to exploit the other nations that are part of this agreement. So the industries that heavily depend on these foreign energy sources are also the same. They're built in the same areas that tend to have the most carbon intensive source of energies, predominantly in the Southwest regions of the United States. And with what we're going to be talking about next, this is specifically the Permian Basin in Texas. Texas as a whole is kind of a fossil fuel haven, but the Permian Basin especially is one of the most heavily carbonized areas of Texas and the United States as a whole.
Thank you so much, Rachel. Okay, so moving into our current struggle as an organization, Rachel did mention the Permian Basin in regards to the NAFTA point. So I'm going to go, so this is a good transition into Newman 6. And if you haven't heard about it, I'll go in depth a little bit more in the next slides. But to talk about Newman 6, you first have to understand the Permian Basin and kind of where it's all tied in. So the Permian Basin climate bomb, according to the analysts at Wood Mackenzie firm, this is the largest and most important source of oil supply growth in the world. So even European countries use fracking from the Permian Basin as, you know, they outsource that to their own countries, which is ironic, or kind of, yeah, ironic, because fracking is illegal in their home countries. So that's kind of the impact that, you know, this climate bomb has on the world. It's so heavily fracked because of its unique geology and amount of oil within the ground there. It's, you know, big players like Chevron, Exxon, and then at a micro level, El Paso Electric are utilizing energy sources from the Permian Basin. So we collaborate, us as an organization, with a nonprofit called Earthworks, and we've used information from their findings. And so that's kind of how we put together our information here. But the Permian Basin is 250 miles wide and 300 miles long. It spreads through West Texas and goes into New Mexico. Over 85,000 drilling permits granted by the Texas Railroad Commission to the Permian Basin since 2006. And it currently produces around 7 billion cubic feet of natural gas per day. Earthworks investigations show violations, massive toxic releases, and no accountability by the TCEQ, which is the Texas Commission on Environmental Air Quality. And we've had some run-ins with TCEQ, which will be explained in the next slides. But where El Paso is connected to the Permian Basin is through a pipeline. And that's how El Paso Electric is also connected to the Permian Basin. That's where JP Morgan's interests come into our city. JP Morgan, just for some background, recently bought out El Paso Electric, and that was a fight that we also had our foot in, and we just wanted city council to reject the buyout because they were the entity that had the power to do that. Unfortunately, we did not win that struggle. So it kind of snowballed into what we have today, which is Newman 6. El Paso Electric will claim that JP Morgan has no role in this, and they say, well, it's the IIF, but they're basically the same entities. They work under the same entities. And so that's kind of their way to, absolve JP Morgan of that. But in reality, they will profit from this while our city, can plummet economically. And for some more background, JP Morgan has been sued for millions of dollars because of power grid manipulation in Colorado and California. So they're one of the largest financiers of the climate crisis. And now they're in our city. So in 2018, there was a mass influx, a massive uprise in demand because of increase in oil prices. So this graph here on the left shows the pipelines that run through the Permian Basin that were constructed before 2018, which was the boom that the Permian Basin saw, and then those constructed after 2018. The El Paso pipeline had been there prior to that uprise. But post-pandemic, there are now too many pipelines and not enough oil to fill them. So there's about 3 billion, I don't remember the measurements, but I'm going to leave that part out because I need to fact check that. But there's no regulation in the Permian Basin by the entities that should be overseeing it, which contributed to this uprise in pipeline construction, and which now has created a deeper problem for the Permian Basin because they don't have enough oil to fill it. And the illustration or the graph on the right here will show all the pipelines that are currently operating or constructed or being constructed in the Permian Basin, and you'll see the El Paso pipeline here. But you can see how it also runs through many other cities in Texas, and that doesn't even include New Mexico. And I will go on. So why Newman 6 matters, or why we should care about it and what we should do. So as Rachel mentioned earlier, we are the 10th sunniest city in the world and the 3rd sunniest city in the nation, but we're only using 6% of our solar energy, which is up 3% from the past 5 years. And El Paso Electric will kind of boast on that and say, well, we've already increased our solar energy usage, so what more do you want us to do? Or they'll say, we've already doubled our solar energy usage, what more can we do? But I mean, yeah, you doubled it up to 6%. And so what we are fighting for, the alternative we are pushing for, is a transition to 100% renewable energy. We understand that that's going to be super expensive and I mean, and very timely. It's a long-term project that we're looking at. But Newman 6 is also expensive and is also timely. And the reason why they are fighting for these permits to build Newman 6, so let me go into what it is first. It's a generator that will, it's an additional generator that will be added onto one of their already existing Newman sites. So El Paso Electric already has 3 working Newman sites here, and they're outdated, they're working past their capacity, and so they want one generator that will replace all of these. But who's to say in the next 20 to 40 years that we will not be in the same position? And and EP will be fighting for more permits. But it is said that there's Newman 6, 7, and 8 in the works as well. So that, I mean, this is going to be a pretty long-term fight. But what we are also pushing for is the abolition of El Paso Electric's monopoly on electricity here in El Paso. So we're pushing for more of a municipality, which is kind of difficult at the moment because of the regulations that El Paso Electric has with City Council. Unfortunately, we cannot do much unless there is a competitor here. And since El Paso Electric is a for-profit monopoly, that's kind of impossible for us at the moment. So Newman 6 would be detrimental to our city on the basis of 3 factors. There's the environmental impacts that it will have on not only El Paso, but Chaparral as well, because it's on the county line of Texas and New Mexico. They're out in the northeast. And fracking, which is how Newman 6 or El Paso Electric gets its energy, it's a pollutant. It's a large pollutant or a large contributor to pollution. And we are already operating over EPA regulations. And so basically this new permit that El Paso Electric is requesting is to go well over what what these EPA regulations are. And I'll talk about those more in the next slides because it's important. And so on the basis of health, we've had a lot of frontline community members in Chaparral. We worked with Dr. David Garcia and his wife, Ida Garcia, who live close to the plant. They're part of an organization called Chaparral Parents in Action. They have been very vocal on how this has affected them health-wise and how this affects their neighbors. And so we get these testimonies from community members who actually live out there who are affected by this. So we're not just posing this issue as, as something that is not real. And then if you look at it economically, Newman 6 is very expensive. And El Paso Electric actually rejected or voted no unanimously on Newman 6 back in October on the basis that it is too expensive. It's going to raise ratepayer rates here in Texas. It won't do it in Chaparral, and I'll explain why later. But basically all of it's going to be like a $18.4 million price tag on El Paso. The construction of the plant is $164 million at the moment, or estimated at $164 million. And the breakdown of that cost can be found online. El Paso Electric has actually published that report. And our main focus here, moving on, our main focus is stopping the plant and getting that permit rejected. And I'll tell you how we'll do that. So we have a long history of fighting El Paso Electric and fighting Newman 6. This campaign has been ongoing for a while. So the issue of Newman 6 arose or came to our organization back in August of last year, right? A little bit after JP Morgan bought out El Paso Electric. So they're all kind of tied in together. Since then, well, we had our first in-person action, which is kind of like first steps of our campaign back in September. And then City Council had their unanimous vote, or unanimously voted no on the plant back in October 2020, as I mentioned, on the basis of it being too expensive. This TCEQ hearing that many of our members were a part of in November back last November, So TCEQ held a hearing for community comments or public comment on Newman 6. El Paso Electric was on that call, or members of El Paso Electric were on that call, including Kelly Tomlin, who is El Paso Electric's new CEO. So at this meeting, 120 plus comments against the plant. They were all against the plant. And the way we saw it was TCEQ really kind of disregarded what we had to say. And I mean, they're like an entity that protects El Paso Electric and has investments in the Permian Basin. So we're not, I mean, well, they don't regulate the Permian Basin. So it was nothing that we really expected, or I mean, didn't not expect. And the NMPRC rejection that came in December, that was both a victory and a loss for us. And this goes back to the $18.4 million price tag that's going to be put on our city. So the New Mexico Public Regulatory Commission back in December rejected the plant because the new EPA regulations in New Mexico would not allow Newman 6 to operate, you know, legally, basically. So the cost before that would have been split between New Mexico and Texas. But since they said no on this, all of that cost will be on El Paso. So it's an 18.4 million estimated, plus another 4.6 million that would have been on Chaparral. But the plant will still physically be in that area. So Chaparral will get none of the electricity from Newman 6, but they will get all of the pollutants, the emissions in their soil. So it became a little bit more crucial that Texas reject this. El Paso Electric will say that doesn't affect ratepayer costs, but in reality, well, I mean, it does. And we've provided City Council with facts, or not facts, but with evidence that this will do that from actual lawyers. And that was with the City Council work session that we had back in February. That was, how do I explain it? So our work session, I was on that. Legal or lawyers from other states and Earthworks representatives from Earthworks were on that work session. We also provided City Council with written testimonies based off of our presentations that they can look over and review. Unfortunately, that was, we figured out who our allies were and who our opponents were on that call. And we do have a lot of opponents in City Council. I will say that the city manager heavily just was against us. They are very pro Newman 6, pro El Paso Electric. So we're kind of shifting our efforts to other entities, which it will go into the preliminary hearing that I will explain in just a bit. We did have our billboard and website launch back in March, and you can visit nonewman6.com for more information on this and the steps that you can take to help us. And our second in-person action was this month, actually, or last month. And that was us kind of publishing our demands to City Council and telling them, or promising from the community, that they will not be voted back in come re-election time. And our next struggle basically is the preliminary hearing that TCEQ will hold on June 3rd. So we'll have members of the Chaparral community who live close to the plant. The requirement from TCEQ is that they have to live 2 miles away from Newman 6. So we've been creating solidarity with the neighbors there, and kind of pushing our efforts to Chaparral and how we can support them in giving their testimonies at the June 3rd hearing. From this hearing, there will then be a contested court case, and they will take speakers, or a judge will choose speakers from this preliminary hearing to then testify at a contested court case, where we are asking El Paso Electric to publish their environmental quality report, something along the lines of that, for Newman 6. That way we can sort of delay the construction of the plant for new EPA regulations to kick in, and they're said to kick in February of 2022. And that comes from the pressure of the Biden administration. And should we stall Newman 6 enough for those EPA regulations to kick in, then it's kind of, that's already the victory for us, because it will be impossible for El Paso Electric to then build this or add this additional generator onto what they already have. So that's kind of a micro perspective of the issues that we see here in El Paso. I know Rachel kind of went over, macro that everyone already knows, but Newman 6 is something that a lot of community members aren't too familiar with. And that's our largest struggle as an organization. So where do we go from here? I left this slide blank, or we left this slide blank to lead this conversation into discussion now. So we have a history of fighting city council and El Paso Electric, and we know where that went in the past with JP Morgan. It wasn't in our favor, so we are expecting, we're expecting the worst, but hoping for the best from our Newman 6 fight. There are a lot more steps that we can take from here. What we're waiting for at this moment is that preliminary hearing. We have collaborated with Mike Siegel. Anyone has heard of him. He is a politician from the Houston area, I believe. And he is helping our organization draft a list of demands that City Council will present as an ordinance. We're gonna try and put Newman 6 on the ballot the same way something like Lost Dog Trail was voted on, right? Because that had an overwhelming support of 89% of people voting yes to save Lost Dog Trail. So that's kind of what we want for Newman 6. We want people to vote no. We want the community to have the say in this, because we've given so much power to City Council, and we've been hitting walls with that. We have maybe 1 or 2 allies out of the 8 representatives, and Mayor Margot and Carla Newman. And so we're shifting our efforts from here. But we do realize that El Paso Electric is a huge entity. They have JP Morgan on their side, and they are protecting the profits of a large, a huge bank and oligarch. These are oligarchs. And so for community members to fight these large corporations is huge. And we realize that we might not get the victory we want, even though we're going to continue fighting until there's nothing left to do. So that goes into a larger discussion of how we will reimagine renewable energy for our city. Our organization in the past has had initiatives where we gathered the community. We talk about different aspects or sectors of how we can transition to net zero, how we can, kind of fight this climate crisis, and what we called our Green New Deal Summit, which we are kind of transitioning into another initiative. I apologize, the cars. But our Green New Deal Summit started last year, around February, and it hit we paused it for our abolition workshops that we conducted around the time of George Floyd's murder. But we want to bring that back, and abolition will be included in that. And we want to tailor it more to, and we mentioned this in our previous slides, the Red Deal. The Red Deal is a way to imagine climate liberation through Indigenous perspectives. And so the Red Deal was co-authored by members of the Red Nation, and they basically propose ways to save our earth, basically, without the needs of politicians, without the needs of laws or like regulations that need to go through the government, and through community effort, basically. So that's how we're tailoring this Green New Deal Summit into another initiative, which we're gonna call maybe the Red Deal Summit. We don't know yet. It's in the works, but I mentioned this because it's a community effort thing, and we realize that that's kind of the bigger picture that we want to see for El Paso. If Newman 6 doesn't go our way, we don't want to stop there. And so we can kind of move this discussion into how, if you all on the call would like to get involved or want more information on those community collaborations, we can do that. But yeah, that is where I will leave it to you all. If you have any questions or just any comments, please feel free to express those at the moment.
Thank you guys for all that information. I mean, that's a lot of research that you guys have done for sure. I'm impressed with how much you guys know. Definitely taught me some stuff. But I'm going to open it up to anybody on the call. Do you have any questions or even just comments?
Well, yeah, I just wanted to say thank you. I mean, I've been living in, I'm not from El Paso, but I've been living here. This is my home now. And I guess it kind of shows me like how unaware I am of all these things. So I just wanted to thank you guys for sharing all the research, and it definitely gives me a lot to think about. So I definitely would be interested in seeing how I can help.
Thank you, Denise, and welcome to El Paso.
Angel, where would you advise people to go if they would like to know more from you guys or collaborate or whatever?
Yeah, of course. So you can go to the website that we put together for Newman 6 if you want more information on Newman 6. It's newman6.com. If you have social media, we are also Sunrise El Paso. Sunrise El Paso on Instagram. And there you will get our link tree, or you can just go to or Google Linktree Sunrise EPTX on the internet, on Google, and there like more of our resources will pop up and how everyone can get involved, in a list of action items that you can do either remotely or in person or in collaboration with us. And we do plug on our social medias orientation opportunities. We did have one today, but we have those regularly, and so whoever wants to get involved can do so. Or if you would like to reach out more directly, you can always email sunriseelpasotexas@gmail.com, and we'll get back to you.
Perfect. Anybody else have any questions or comments while we have them on the line?
Hi, my name's Alex Mayer. I thank you for that presentation. It was also really informative for me too. I'm also relatively new to El Paso, and I've heard about the Newman 6 controversy. So that was very helpful. And thank you for all of your efforts. I know I'm guessing all of you do is voluntary, and takes a lot of time out of your very busy schedules where you're either trying to go to school or make a living. So thank you for that.
Thank you, Alex, and welcome. Welcome to El Paso as well.
Well, I also wanted to mention when I saw the title of this workshop, one thing I'm interested in is what will be the impacts of climate change on El Paso, and will those impacts have will there be some impacts that are more pronounced on the lesser advantaged portions of our population? And so I wonder if Sunrise, I know you have your hands full, and Green Hope, I know you have your hands full, if you're going to be looking at any of those aspects.
Oh, 100%. So where Newman 6 is located geographically, the demographic that it affects there are more communities of color. They're also older and less affluent. They don't have the resources to, access healthcare as much as others in El Paso would. So in terms of Newman 6, we have looked into that deeply because of where it is located. It's towards northeast El Paso, and if you know that area, you know that it was intentional that El Paso Electric places their site there. They also have sites towards one on the west side, which is more of an affluent community, but the west side is also home to those that live in a community called Anapra. Anapra is one of the poorest neighborhoods in El Paso, and there is a plant, the Rio Grande plant, that is located literally right next to it. And then, of course, the site that's off of the freeway, that is also home to more vulnerable populations. And so we see that it's very intentional where they place their sites and where they basically conduct production. The Permian Basin is out in Odessa and Midland. Yeah, it has like locations out there. And those are also communities where the more vulnerable populations live. So it will have adverse effects on the city as a whole, but the communities that are directly, next to it or close to it will be affected a little bit more than the city in its entirety. And we are already a poor city. And so our access to resources that more, affluent cities have is limited.
I also want to chime in here. Because of the way that El Paso is situated with the mountains and also being in the desert, the air kind of settles here. And that means that all of the pollutants that are put into the air kind of settles here as well, because we don't get rain here. So we don't have the way that the air cycles with the different densities and the different temperatures, which means that it all just collects in this valley. So all of the pollutants that this Newman 6 plant would be putting out into the air they wouldn't disperse. It would all just stay here. And that is the sort of thing that contributes to rising temperatures. And on a more broad scale, if nothing is done about climate change and the climate crisis, El Paso is one of the areas that would be directly affected by rising temperatures. So already our summers are hot and horrible, and we spend most of July above 100 degrees, and that would only get worse. We would see temperatures soar to, it could be as high as 140 degrees in like a worst case scenario. And to tie that in to EP Electric, obviously that requires cooling the houses that you live in. And if you are not as affluent, then you don't have the same kinds of funds to cool your house, which means that your health and your life is directly at risk because of these rising temperatures. And then you go outside into this hot weather and you have these pollutants that have settled because of the Newman 6 plant. And so it all just layers on top of each other to create a horrible living situation, basically, that the least affluent would be directly impacted by and would have to exist in a much different world than those that have the money and the privilege to be able to afford air conditioning and clean water, and in a worst case scenario, like filtration systems for the air and things like that. So there's a lot of layers.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
Yeah, you're welcome. There's also a scarcity of water because we don't get rain very much. And so El Paso Electric is a huge consumer of water. And that is also another effect that is because of where we are located geographically.
Awesome. Any other comments or questions? I know we have a few minutes left. I do that teacher wait time. I in the classroom, I'm used to like, I'll give them processing time, and then some people are shy. And so guys, if you are a little shy, or if you think of something later, they have given you all the information to contact them. I know they're very active on social media, and so feel free to get a hold of them. Again, we thank both of you for your time. You're very well informed. You're very well spoken. We appreciate you coming on a Saturday, and everybody in attendance, thank you for taking your Saturday to educate yourself. We really appreciate you guys being a part of this because, without an audience, these things don't happen. And so the community getting involved, it means a lot. And on that note, I'm going to segue into the fact that there are several more workshops going on. So please go to the website, greenhopeproject.org. It's as diverse as how to compost, and then stuff in the Girl Scouts, and then policy. So please check them out. We have one more today at 2:30. So, and this is geared towards how to teach your students about our ecosystem, but it's open to anybody. And it's about how you can help heal Mother Earth. And then tomorrow, like I said, there's more workshops from the Earthship Biotexture, from us, how zoos are the ark, making more eco-conscious decisions, just about kind of more fun and sustainable products that you could be buying. So that one's kind of cool. And then these workshops will end at the end of May. So they continue every weekend and throughout the week. But as soon as May is over, the workshops end. And then hopefully next year we can actually do this in person with live music and catering and conferences and kids activities. So please follow us at greenhopeproject.org. Sign up for the newsletter. We have several contests throughout the year, including a recycled art project where we give out about $1,500 of prizes. So thank you again to both of you guys. So we have Angel. I don't know if, Rachel's still here. Thank you, Angel and Rachel. We appreciate you guys and everybody for attending. So the recording will be made available later. So thanks, guys.
Thank you all.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Have a great weekend, everyone.
So much.